Good evening from New York. I am Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Journeys. Thank you for joining us this evening. Those of you who are joining for the first time, welcome to CWS. CWS is about having conversations with people about their journeys and how they're using their gifts and talents to help others. Our guest this evening is Dr. Lear Matthews, professor at the Department of Community and Human Services, State University of New York, Empire State College. A former lecturer at the University of Guyana, he is a member of the editorial board of the Caribbean Journal of Social Work. He is a certified clinical social worker and chair of the advisory boards of the Caribbean American Social Workers Association and the CUNY Medgar Evers Social Program. But I will leave it there, take a short break, and when I come back, we'll chat with Professor Lear. And we are back. The gentleman next to me is Dr. Lear Matthews. Professor, if you were not a professor, what would be your career?
I would probably be a nurse or a medical doctor.
Really?
That was my interest. My father actually was an old sick nurse and dispenser. And he influenced me very much in my early days. And I used to sort of actually watch him do his work, you know, in his dispensary, Grove East Bank, Demerara. Mm-hmm. He was one of those dispensers in those days who never actually left Guyana for training. He did all his training at home. He was very popular among especially the rural community. So yeah, that was my hope as a young man, a child growing up.
It's funny you mentioned him. What is your favorite memory of your parents growing up in Guyana?
My favorite memory is my parents teaching me, first of all, certain positive values, to be disciplined, and encouraging my brothers and sisters and myself to look out for one another. Mm-hmm. And we took note of that, and we practiced those principles of looking out for one another, taking care, being responsible, that kind of thing.
A sort of a community.
Exactly, yeah.
And I want to arc forward and then come back, because it is so important. How did that initial community or experience with community among your family members, how did it affect the way you look at your research in community development and so on later on?
Well, it translated into my forming a sort of a worldview mm-hmm. of understanding that communities are made up of families, and my observation of various families, some who were struggling, others were doing a bit better than some. And my mother always told me that whatever you do, wherever you go, always look back, not only for family, but for community. And that helped to mold not only my personality, mm-hmm. but to formulate sort of a worldview and a mission in terms of how to interact with others, how to recognize others. And my mother also instilled in me the importance of being humble.
Yes.
That was very, very important. Not to brag about what you have, work hard, and whatever you have, always share with others.
What was it like growing up at ages 9 and 16 in Guyana?
Yeah. Actually, between the age of 7 and 9, I was born in Haley Street, Georgetown.
Uh-huh.
And between the ages of 7 and 9, I actually lived with my grandparents in Belladrum, West Coast, Berbice. And that was a fascinating experience. Tough, but fascinating.
Okay.
And so I was doing a lot of farm work, you know, putting up the sheep and the poultry and that kind of thing, fetching water from the roadside. And that's something I wasn't accustomed to before I left Georgetown. So that was a very, very important aspect of my life. Upon returning to Georgetown, I returned to primary school, and I was involved not only in schoolwork, academia, but track and field. And I was known as a good sprinter.
Uh-huh.
So I was that was one of my major extracurricular activities, and I got a scholarship to Tutorial High School, track and field, and then eventually I got a track scholarship to Inter-American University, Puerto Rico.
Oh.
So those formative years were not only in terms of molding me, in terms of academia, but in terms of my own physical development. And you know.
What do you think your experiences in Berbice with your grandparents? What do you think it did for you?
Well, it made me a better person in so many ways, in terms of the way I recognize other people, the way I treat other people, be humble, be helpful, and to understand that hard work and perseverance would get you, a far way. So those are some of the values that were instilled.
What do you miss most about living in Guyana?
I miss many aspects of the culture. Being there to experience what I'm accustomed to, or what I grew up with. As a matter of fact, it is important for me to remain connected because I miss so much of Guyana. I miss the food, different aspects of the culture, the belief system, the gaffing with people,
yes.
Grounding with folks from there, and revisiting places that I've grown up.
How important, you've done some work in what is called cultural, in retaining your cultural identity. I can't remember exactly what it is, but you've done some extensive work in that.
Right.
How important is what you do in terms of not reacquainting, but staying in contact with these aspects of your culture? How important is that to the average immigrant or an immigrant group?
I think it's very important, especially those of us who emigrated from the Caribbean as adults, teenagers and adults. I think it helps us with this may seem sort of paradoxical, but I think retaining aspects of one's culture from the home country helps with the integration and assimilation process. And I believe that, as a matter of fact, the subtitle of my book is Transnational Identities. And this is a process whereby immigrants' lives are influenced both by the host country, in this case the United States, and the Caribbean. That both of those elements fuse and help them to have a meaningful existence in the United States or wherever they immigrated.
Well, one might argue or say, well, if you forget or you disassociate yourself from where you came from or the culture, you might faster or easier assimilate to the adopted culture. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, yeah. There's some people. There's an argument that it is better if you're going to settle in a particular area, particular country, in this case, the United States, that it would be better for you in terms of your own progress to fully integrate into the new system. I argue that that's not necessarily so, that what you bring with you from the home country is part of your ability to assimilate. And as a matter of fact, this transnational lifestyle, I think, is something that people don't realize. It's very much a part of them, very much a part of them. There's some people who, there is a process whereby people try to psychologically adjust to the United States, for example, and they use a sort of a splitting process whereby they either denigrate the country they're from and glorify the country they're immigrating to, or it goes the other way around. Sometimes they glorify the country where they're from and denigrate the country, and that happens a lot. It's a psychological thing, and it's part of the adjustment process.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's sort of a splitting phenomenon.
What does being Guyanese mean to you?
Being Guyanese mean a whole lot to me. It means a person who is well grounded in his original culture, and so that drives me to really sustain many what I think important elements of Guyana, some of the Caribbean period, and that's why I'm involved in organizations such as the Guyana Cultural Association. That means a lot to me. That helps me to remain connected. So it means a lot. It means a lot to me.
Why did you actually choose teaching as a profession, and what actually led you to that path, that career path?
You know, it wasn't really planned. I just fell into it. I started teaching as a pupil teacher in Guyana primary school, taught for about a year. And then I got a scholarship to Inter-American University. And then as I got involved in higher education, I realized that I would not want to share my knowledge with others. And what better forum for that but to engage in teaching.
Can you describe for us your work in the adaptation of immigrants in North America?
Yeah. Well, I have looked at one of the institutions that has a very great impact on the retaining of cultural elements. There's something called hometown associations.
Yes.
These are organizations formed by immigrants from the same village, town, city, or shared institutions back in the home country. And they form these organizations in order to, one, to support their communities back home. On the other hand, these organizations also function to integrate and help them to maintain their culture in the host country. Very, very important. In my research, I have found in North America alone, Canada and the United States, there are over 350 of these organizations, and I'm talking about high school alumni associations, I'm talking about church groups, I'm talking about institutional, professional groups and that kind of thing. They're a very powerful force, not only in helping to integrate and helping Caribbean immigrants to adjust in the new society, but also to retain contacts at home.
Why should the average immigrant get involved in one of these home associations?
Well, as I said, some of the membership is very deliberate. One of the things I found, interestingly enough, is that there's a problem of recruiting new members in these organizations. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because there are two types of members in these organizations. There are other types, but the two types I found in my research. There are those who have had prominent positions in the home country. Mm-hmm. And they join these organizations and they become part of the executive. And psychologically, it seems as if it is part of the reason is to sustain that level of prestige that they, because remember, small scale society is different from large scale society. So I found that on the other hand, I found that some of the executive members are those who perhaps felt not that important in the home country, and they join the organizations. They're part of the executive, and it gives them a sort of psychological boost. Very interesting. Another thing that I found, if you don't mind,
no, go ahead.
A little more, is that they have a difficult time recruiting new members, and part of the reason seemed to be the fact that the established members, as a matter of fact, the average age of these organizations is like 50, 55. People who are well established and so on, people who want to give back and so on. But I found that the executive membership sort of recycled itself, right? You know, the president may be president for 3 years, and then the secretary may then be president. And they're aging out. Mm-hmm. Even though they would say, "Oh, we have to keep this organization going. We need new members." So it's a sort of a hold me, loose me thing. So what they do, they would say, we want new members. But on the other hand, we don't want people coming into this thing that in started. They might break it up, that kind of thing. So they have that fear of losing the organization. So what happens? The organizations are aging out. And the membership is just circulating among a few members. And this is a major problem for a lot of these organizations. Now, hometown associations, nothing new. It's been very prevalent among folks from Central America, parts of Africa, and so on. Those, immigrants who are here from those countries. But it's a relatively emerging phenomenon among English-speaking Caribbean immigrants. It has increased tremendously over the past 50 years. Dr. Bonnet has done some work on these associations also. Mm-hmm. Okay, so very, very important part of my research.
What, in your research with hometown associations, was there anything that surprised you in your findings?
One of the things that surprised me, and something that when I go out to talk about them, is the fact that many of these organizations have the 501c3 certification to function in New York State, for example. Mm-hmm. And some of these organizations seem sort of nonchalant about keeping up their certification, doing what they're supposed to do to be recertified. As a matter of fact, I learned recently that a few organizations, hometown associations, including Guyanese hometown associations, lost their certification because they did not do the right thing in terms of retaining them. So that surprised me because they're doing such important work, Okay, so that's one of the things that really, really surprised me about the organization.
I want to shift a little bit to the Caribbean crime. What are your thoughts about the escalation of crime in some of the Caribbean countries?
Well, crime in the Caribbean, as in many other parts of the world, especially there is a relation between crime and conditions of poverty when there's high unemployment, but there's also politically motivated crime. So that's part of it right now. So there are those two types of issues, and I think a lot of crime is committed by the younger people, and I think it's connected definitely to conditions of poverty, unemployment, and things like that. An interesting note is that for decades, parts of the Caribbean, including Guyana, has treated suicide as a crime.
Suicide?
Right. Rather than looking at it as a psychological problem. Now they're beginning to do that, but that's just a concern, because one of the things that I learned in my research is that in some communities, when there's a suicide, for example, rather the police is called, but there's no there are no adequate resources for people in mental health and that kind of thing. So there's a need for that. So the crime, as I'm saying, is both motivated by the lack of resources, conditions of poverty, which would include unemployment, for example, and also some of it historically in the Caribbean has been of a political nature.
Is there a connection, and this might be a leap, let me see how I can, between the adaptation of immigrants in American society and, well, I'm coming from this angle. In recent years, there's been a lot of criminals, Caribbean of Caribbean immigrants, being sent back to their country of origin. Some of them have no idea. They have no recollection of having growing up there. They have no real ties and so on. But they're populating these Caribbean countries with these criminal elements. And do you think, to some degree, that is a contributing factor
correlation
to the increase?
Right. I think, yes, there is, but I think there is many of these folks, first of all, under this administration, I don't know if you know this, there's been the highest number of deportees, including deportees of Caribbean origin, right? And the interesting thing about that, as a matter of fact, there was a plan to deport 400,000 immigrants per year for the past, for 8 years or whatever. The idea, however, was to focus on those immigrants who had a criminal record, because what happens is that they're prosecuted, they've served their time, and then they're deported. And the interesting thing about that is that the president was asked, actually, by a group of immigrant advocates, how come all these folks are being deported? And the reason I'm talking about it is because there's a large numbers of Caribbean immigrants who have been deported, right, over the past 5-6 years. And the chief executive's answer was starkly political. He said, we have to demonstrate to the Republicans that we are tough on immigration. Interesting. But like everything else, when this particular policy of deportation is being implemented at the state level, the local level, it goes beyond what the intent was. So people who did not have criminal records were being swept up and deported. Now, my response to your question is yes. I haven't seen the research, but I heard folks saying that the deportees are among those who commit a lot of crime when they return. One of the problems is that not all of the deportees have committed crimes per se, felonies, if you will. And the point you were making with them not having, not knowing anything about Guyana or Jamaica or whatever is a serious problem. And I believe that these countries should develop services for these folks to help them reintegrate into the society, and that's not happening. That's not happening.
Well, what is one of the greatest misconceptions about adaptation of immigrants to North America?
Well, I think one of the misconceptions is that it is relatively easy for people to give up their culture and just assimilate into society. I think that's one of the myths. Some people, especially the adult immigrant, it is difficult for them to just assimilate into society. Unlike the old immigrants of the 18th and 19th centuries, who most likely when they came here, there was no intent of returning. after traveling for such a long time, a perilous voyage. But with the newer immigrants, and by newer immigrants, I'm looking at post-1965 immigrants. In 1965, there was a very important family reunification policy that was passed, which allowed the sponsorship of relatives and so on and so on. And these newer immigrants, from then up to today, are more likely, and it's easier for them to keep in touch with their home country because of the technology.